The subgenre of Soulslike or Soulsborne games has brought us many great entries. Most of them are heavily inspired by Dark Souls or Bloodborne, but often bring some new and fresh ideas to the table that set them apart from the clear inspiration. Steelrising succeeds in being different by introducing fun mechanics and the choice of setting, but has a hard time to compete in the technical finesse of other Souls-likes. The story of Steelrising takes place during the French Revolution, but in an alternative universe, where robots have taken over Paris. You control Aegis, the only robot that hasn't gone berserk, and who is the bodyguard of Marie Antoinette. Aegis gets the task to stop the king, who seems to have his hands in all this, and controls a robot army. That's pretty straightforward, and in fact the story is told in a straightforward way, unlike Dark Souls, Elden Ring or even Mortal Shell. But also the story is not as interesting as in these games. There's not really an arc of suspense here, mostly because there isn't much happening that would change the general idea that was set in the beginning of the game. No mystery to uncover or even twists that could change your view on the characters or the events that are happening. However, you can change the ending of the game, because your actions affect the other characters you meet along the way. Mostly it comes down to how many side quests you complete, but it definitely gives the game a replay value. I for myself only did a handful of side missions, and in the end I got the feeling I had somewhat of a bad ending. Sadly, all this is presented with pretty ugly cutscenes with way too blurry backgrounds. And also, the facial animations are hideous to look at and totally threw me off. At some points I couldn't help but laugh at them, and sometimes they left me wondering how facial animations like this can exist in 2022. But mainly, they broke the immersion almost completely for me. So if you play this game, just be prepared that you could have a hard time telling if you're talking to a human or a robot, because the animation looks almost the same. All of the story takes place in Paris in the year 1789. The developers of Spiders did a great job of building a beautiful and unique world full of atmosphere. While of course most of the areas are city environments with winding streets and even rooftops to discover, Spiders really made an effort of sending Aegis to different locations like extensive gardens, underground passages and even a mining site. I was surprised by the diversity and had a ton of fun exploring Paris. Exploring was also entertaining because Aegis gets access to a few gadgets during the story, like a hookshot that helps you reach some rooftops or other high places, or a dash you can perform mid-air. Unlocking and using these gadgets almost felt a bit like a Metroidvania, because you can go back to areas you visited before and open new paths. And because going back and discovering different parts of the locations is completely optional, it felt rewarding finding new weapons, clothing and other items. You can also utilize the gadgets in combat, and each gadget comes with one of three elements. Like for example the dash I mentioned is used to close distance to your enemy and inflict frost damage. And the hookshot works a bit like a ranged weapon with lightning damage. I think this is a clever idea because as soon as you collect all the gadgets you always have access to every element during combat. I thought they were very useful and did some good damage. Speaking of combat, as mentioned, this is an action game inspired by Dark Souls, so you lock onto your enemy, perform light and heavy attacks, and collect the game's currency by defeating your opponent. When you die, you lose this currency called Anima Essence and return to the last bonfire. Vestal. It's called Vestal in Steelrising. The unique thing about combat is your stamina. Stamina is used for jumping, running, dodging, attacking, and using your gadgets. The twist is that as soon as you hit 0 stamina, Aegis' body overheats and isn't able to perform attacks, dodges and so on. Instead of waiting for your stamina to gradually refill, you can press a button at the right time to instantly cool down and get a full stamina bar again. I think that spices up the combat because I had to strategize a bit and make quick decisions because cooling down comes at the cost of taking frost damage. If you cool down too often in a short period of time, you freeze and can't move, so you always have to take care of your stamina. Also, you can choose 2 weapons for fighting and switch them at any point during combat. Weapon variety is okay, you get dual blades, claws, fans, muskets and a few others with different elements. Every one of them feels unique and useful and comes with a special move. But unique does not necessarily mean good. Combat in general feels a bit sloppy, I would say. That's mostly because many animations are imprecise and damage feedback seems to randomly switch between good and no response at all. I get used to all of that after a few hours and with the game, but overall the combat left something to be desired. Animal variety starts off great, but just after a few hours I realized that the number of different enemies is extremely limited because every robot just has 2 or 3 variations. The same goes for bosses. Sometimes I could not see any difference between a boss and a normal enemy I fought, except the bigger health bar. That's a big disappointment because in games like these, boss fights are oftentimes the most memorable moments in the entire game. And I can't believe I say this, but boss fights are way too easy for an action RPG like that. Attack patterns are super easy to learn and dodge, and the damage is not much higher than the damage you take from all the other robots. And that's why it's even more surprising that Steelrising has an assist mode, where you can set your stamina regeneration, whether or not you want to lose your anima essence when you die, and even the damage you take. Honestly, I think this is a superb idea to implement difficulty settings like this. But for a game like Steelrising, which is probably the easiest Soulslike I have ever played, this seems like an odd choice to implement. Steelrising is a game where in the first hours of my playthrough I constantly asked myself, why do I have fun? At first this was not easy to answer, because on the technical side this game has flaws. A few of them can be overlooked, or at least you get used to them, like a sloppy feel in combat, but the graphical issues like the ugly face animation turned me off over and over again. Still, Steelrising has a unique setting. Paris is beautiful and the level design feels varied. Although bosses are a disappointment and way too easy, combat is fun overall because it introduces some cool ideas and progression is satisfying. I would recommend Steelrising to players that want to get into Souls-likes but need an easy entry point, and to players who can't get enough of Souls-like but need a break from challenge and maybe a break from medieval settings. Thanks for watching. Have you played Steelrising yet? What is your favorite Souls-like? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more reviews of upcoming games, and leave a like if you enjoyed this review. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.